Would you be willing, in the name of love, to come on stage and get naked? No? Yeah. Well, that's why I didn't want to be here today. Absolutely. You know why? Because talking about love exposes you. Right? It's like getting naked. So I didn't want to be here. But then I spoke to Isadora. Where is Isadora? She's not here yet. You know how she is, Isadora. She has the power to convince you. Right? So, and she told me, Leopold, we don't want you to give a talk. We want you to give us an experience. And please make it a crazy one. I'm like, you asked for it, fine. So today will be like an experiment. It's not a talk per se. It's an experiment, an exploration. But I promise you by the end of it, you will be braver than me and more willing to expose yourself and your emotions. Okay? And speaking of crazy, let's talk about the crazy one. Steve Jobs. I love this. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. Now, the reason I love that is I think it works on really everything. It works on technology, on innovation, on philosophy, and definitely on love. I mean, some of the people I spoke with yesterday, they told me that they enjoyed Professor Hicks' presentation precisely because he was connecting the dots backward, right? And showing you the whole history behind it. So that's the tool for innovation, really. Now, I want you to think for a moment as your emotions, as dots in your soul. Your emotions, your conclusions, your ideas, your premises, all these are different dots in your soul. But there is a trick. Not all dots are equal. I'll give you an example. Raise your hand if you are afraid of public speaking. Why? Well, it's normal. The thing is, I wanted to think about stage fright as a dot. Now, sure, it has some connection, but with some tools, the right tools, you can overcome it. Right? It's not a big deal. All you need to overcome that fear, that evaluation of the stage, is the right tools. Love. Ooh. Love? Well, have you ever been in love with the wrong person? And you knew it all along? I have. Absolutely. Why? If love was simple, all we have to do is just connect some dots and fix it or nurture it, right? But it's not. I mean, you're in a toxic relationship, the easiest way to say, you know what, I feel something for you, it's amazing, but it's not working out. Angel, where's Angel? She gave us an example yesterday. You know, it's not working out, you're degrading me, let's break up. When did that happen? Right? We struggle with toxic relationships. Why? I think two reasons. The first one is because I think love is not just a dot, it's a complex and a system of integrated dots. So think about this. It's a web of complex dots made of emotions and conclusions and experiences and values and ideas and all coming together, giving you that feeling of love. That's the first reason. So love is a system. Which means in order to not overcome, but to nurture your love, you need a system for love. Right? And that's why you're studying philosophy. Because ultimately philosophy is the foundational system by which you guide your choices and actions in life, right? But you need also other systems, love system, work system, what have you. So that's the first reason. The second reason, I think, I realize that when it comes to love, we tend to connect the dots looking forward. I want to improve this toxic relationship. I want to fix it. Even worse, I want to fix the person. Right? And it happens with good people who are really benevolent and they want to be heroic and become the psychologist of that person and they want to fix it. right? So we're like connecting the dots, looking forward, right? You want to find a job that you love, that you can have the integrity and not compromise, on your values. You want to find your perfect soulmate, but you can't find love. You can't find love until you become what you wish to find. And I learned that from Nathaniel Branden. You can't find love until you become what you wish to find. And that process of becoming is the process of connecting the dots backward. Now, Ayn Rand had one concept that summarized everything I just said. And it's the concept of sense of life. I don't want to go technical today, but I just want to stress something here because it's just absolutely amazing. And I highly recommend you read The Romantic Manifesto. You read more about sense of life. But really what she's telling us is that what you fall in love with is a person's sense of life, which is, you can think about it as the collection of all these dots in your system, these implicit conclusions and emotions and experiences, and all of that forms your sense of life, right? And guess what? All of that is reflected in your character and in your biggest goals and ambitions and desire, but also, and I love how precise she is, in your smallest gestures. We tend to forget that. The smallest thing make a big difference, right? So I summarize all of that as a journey of transformation. And I like to think about today, not me giving you information, okay, but together creating a transformative journey. Why? Because transformation, and I want you to remember that, take a picture of that. Transformation takes transportation. In order to transform yourself, you have to transport yourself backward to connect the dots, and then you look forward and envision a better future, a better relationship, what have you. Make sense? Okay. Now, I created a system called the Loveshake. Just, can you tell me, what do you think is a Loveshake? Just take a wild guess. There's no right and wrong. Just.
You shake until you find love.
You shake?
Until you find love.
Okay, that's nice. Go ahead.
Like, how do you love the style of expressing your love?
That's interesting.
This is a mix of the languages of love of yours and of your partner.
Wow, how did you think about that?
Like the way you express your love,
Okay.
and the way you love to feel.
Okay, cool. I love that.
Mix of all the ingredients will make you fall in love with someone.
Mix of all the ingredients. Someone told me when I was showing it to a friend, he's like, is that a milkshake combined with something? So yeah, before I tell you what's the Loveshake, because if you know me, you know I like to tease you, I'm not going to tell you now what's the Loveshake, but I'm going to invite you to a journey of transformation that I had to do in order to discover the Loveshake. Okay, ready? Okay, so it happened this way. A couple of months ago, I was tucking my daughter in bed, and I put her in bed and I say, oh, I love you. And she looked at me and she's like, Daddy, why you always tell me I love you? I know you love me. I'm like, seriously? That's my daughter. What do you tell her? She's 4 years old. I didn't know what to tell her. I was like, But then I heard myself thinking to myself, maybe because my father rarely told me I love you. And suddenly, I don't know how the mind works, but suddenly I was transported to a deep dot in my soul. And here I am, a young boy, sitting in my cozy living room and watching my father and his hands. His hands. Why? I don't know. You see, I love my father's hands. He had the most beautiful hands you would ever see. Long fingers, shiny skin. And if you could touch his hands, you would feel that despite being so large, they're incredibly soft. I was like, wow, why am I remembering all this? But they're so heavy. They weigh a ton. And I would see myself sitting and meditating on his hands, just how they move. Do you know someone in your life whose soul is expressed through his hands? I can think of Italian people. Allora, buongiorno, principessa, mangiare, pisare. It's so much, expressive. Not my father. My father wasn't. He wasn't expressive at all. But he had a particular way of using his hands even in the most trivial things. He'd be watching an emotional movie. He'd take his big hand and bury his face in it. Guess why? So we don't see him crying. And I'm like, bloody hell, just cry. What's wrong with expressing good emotion? Just cry. He would sit in the living room, focus on his laptop with total focus and concentration. Nothing would distort his work. Not our laughter, not our cries, full focus. But guess how we would know that he finished his work? He'd take his big hand and drag his skin down. And I could still hear my mom screaming at him, stop pulling your skin down, you'll get old quicker. And she would run to him and lift his skin up just like that. And I always saw that as an act of love made visible. I love that. Imagine you have a stack of paper, A4 paper, right? How many times can you keep on tearing them? Once, twice. My father had the power to keep on tearing the paper with precision and perfection and respect until they are a tiny bundle. And I would look at him and I'm like, why are you doing this? Just throw it in the bin. See that? That's his answer. Piercing eyes, Mona Lisa smile. No answer. That's my father. He was an actor, by the way. Part of his life, he was an actor. And it always fascinated me, like, why he's not expressive and how come his art, he's an artist, right? He's so expressive. Why he's not expressive in his personal life? And I hated it. I hated it that he wasn't expressive. And in fact, for a long time, I adopted his kind of dichotomy between words and action. I would go with a girlfriend, and I'm feeling that I love her, but I would never tell her I love you. That's a sign of weakness, isn't it? No, right? But I adopted that. I adopted that mindset. So I was a bit judgmental in my journey, but then the more I started looking inward and connecting the dots, I discovered my father's way of life, and I'm calling it now like a circular creativity. It's like everything he does is made with purpose and love and is always connected to everything else. Unbelievable. Like he'd be washing the dishes and he would create the whole system on what to wash, when to wash, what to dry. And I'm like, just wash the dishes. Do you see my attitude? Just throw it in the bin. Just bring her a bouquet of flowers. Just go out with her. If you know me, you know that I focus a lot on this concept of carelessness, how much we adopt this principle of carelessness when we're young. So this whole journey gave me a lot of insights and inspiration. And honestly, as much as I would have loved to hear the words, I love you from my father, he taught me one of the greatest lessons ever. He never said it in words, but I inferred it from his action. And the lesson is, find the treasure in the trivial. Find your treasure in the trivial. You see, one of the most important things that I notice when I'm introspecting, when I'm connecting the dots backward, is that we tend to ignore the trivial things in our life, or the smallest gestures, right? We take them as not important, so we dismiss them, or if we're too philosophical and cultured, we're like, I'm not gonna look at the trivial things. I want like something deep. But sometimes the treasure lies in the trivial. Raise your hand if you read The Fountainhead. Okay, so some of you didn't read it, so I'm not gonna spoil it, but I'll tell you to keep an eye on two things when you're reading Ayn Rand's work. Three things, actually. The first one, notice how much she focused on the body. Like this is I'm not gonna spoil it, but this is a scene from when Dominique first met Howard Rourke. And it's amazing that she didn't remember anything about him or the moment except his hands. Now, there's a reason why she's doing that, right? Which I'm not going to spoil it on you, but notice that. Notice also, I think this is her signature, how much she stresses on the face. On the face, whether from the villain or the hero. And one last thing I want you to notice, which sounds trivial, is the first thing the character says in any novel. Whenever you're reading, notice the first thing the character said. Atlas Shrugged, you read it? No? Okay, so there's a character that the first thing he said is, don't bother me, don't bother me, don't bother me. It's a trivial line, right? When I first read it, it's like, not important. But actually, it's the condensation of his whole philosophy in these simple lines. Don't bother me, don't bother me, don't bother me. It's unbelievable. One of her villains in The Fountainhead, also his whole sense of life is characterized, in my opinion, in his ankles. You go like, seriously? How can she do that? I learned to love the trivial, because when you look at them, you will find so many insights worth uncovering. So, I'm still teasing you. I'm not going to tell you yet what's the Loveshake, but I noticed there are three things that are so important to build a system. I think it works on any system, whether it's a business system or a love system, and these are, just some ideas. The first one is introspection. So introspection, storytelling, visibility. Introspection is one of the most important tools we have at our disposal that we don't often use. And it's the whole idea of looking inward, right? I usually tell my clients, go to the place you don't want to go to. If you want to tell a story, look for that place where you're afraid, or you're so happy but you don't have the words, right? So go to that place you don't want to go to, and there you will find a lot of insights about yourself and your relationship. So introspection. Again, Rand spoke a lot about this, and she was one of the advocates of introspecting. And look at this statement. She's like, if we learn how to do it, we can become ideal giants. Why? Because there's so much within us that we don't look at. Right? We read an article, we read a book, and we're like, yeah, that's the book, but we don't reflect it on our lives. I know that because I've been doing it throughout my whole life. Then I noticed that it's a big, big problem. The second one is storytelling. So it's not enough to say, I want to look into myself and ask, what am I feeling? And why am I feeling it? It's not enough. What's important is to say, how can I relive this? And you relive it through stories. So you look at your feeling and you say, what was the setup? Who were the characters in that setup? What was the conflict? Who inspired me? Who broke my spirit? Whatever, right? What was the message? So introspection is not enough. Storytelling is not enough. So you might introspect, journal. I know a lot of people who journal, which is great, but also that's not enough. What you need to do is, and this is a concept I learned from entrepreneurship, is prototype. You need to prototype your ideas. And how do you prototype? Well, that's one way I'm doing it now. I came up with this whole system, which I'm going to reveal now, and I want to test it. I want to build something physical, something tangible, something visible, so I can test it out with you and see if it resonates or not. You see? So it's like the first two, it's between you and yourself, but the visibility part is between you and other people. Okay? Oops, sorry. So I want to share something interesting here. Yesterday, someone was asking me, Leopold, you're so passionate about objectivism and philosophy in general. You just love philosophy. Why are you a public speaking coach? Why you're so you want to integrate public speaking and philosophy. And I usually say, to give you the words you need for the time you need them. To give you the words you need for the time you need them, which is a line I borrowed from Francisco in Atlas Shrugged. And if anyone read Atlas Shrugged and is interested to ask me about it, I can show you why Francisco was a great public speaking coach. And I love this craft. You know why? Because it's highly philosophical. I always say what you do backstage puts you on stage. And backstage is a process of introspecting, of uncovering your deepest philosophy, of learning about your pains and gains and joys, right? That's the backstage process, and then you prototype it on stage. Do you see that? What is better to tell you, here's the right philosophy, here's what I think about love, or to say, how about I invite you to a world where you can travel inside yourself, discover yourself, and then come up with a new understanding of your whole philosophy. Which one is better? Right? Okay, so what is the Loveshake? Any question? Like I don't want this to be like a lecture. Any question, burning question in mind before I reveal the Loveshake? No? Okay. So what is the Loveshake? While I'm doing my whole journey of transportation, I was like, there's something there. Like, why am I thinking about my father's hands? Why is it so interesting? So I kept doing the whole work. And suddenly, I was transported to another deep dot in my soul that I've been avoiding for the past 2 years. And here I am. And really, if you could see me on that day, it was 2 years ago, cold day, March 24, I'm standing in line and shaking people's hands. And I'm looking at these people, and I'm like, I know these people, but why do they look like strangers? Why? I know them, but they feel like strangers. And I kept shaking these hands, and I'm hearing them repeating the same words in the most robotic tone ever. May he rest in peace. Your father was a great man. May he rest in peace. I was numb. And suddenly, something extraordinary happened. While I'm shaking my hands with another stranger, he stopped in midair and performed a special handshake. You see, my father was a very selective man. If he loved you, he would teach you his love shake, which is a special handshake. He didn't care whether you're family or not. If he truly valued you as a person, he had a secret handshake. Just a playful, it's not nothing serious. But he would teach you his handshake. So this stranger didn't need any words, right? But at this moment, with his love shake, he brought my father back to life, at least for a couple of seconds. So what I want you to do is, when you think about your journey, ask yourself, when was the last time I looked inward and I breathed life into my ideas? Okay, I need a volunteer. I want to show you the love shake. Okay, stand here. Okay, so it's so cool, by the way. No? You start like this, and then you turn, give me your thumb, and then you turn it like this, and then, okay, let me explain. Here's the principle. Stand apart. The first step you do in any relationship is counterintuitive. You stand apart. You embrace your individuality, and you embrace the whole idea that there will be conflict. Conflict is necessary, not just in romantic relationship, in everything. Stand apart. Stand together. Have fundamental values where you can agree on. Right? Have deep connection, and it takes work to have deep connections and keep them. And then, stand out. And you touched Angel on that idea. I loved when Angel said, Thomas helped me to grow, to stand out, to push me. Right? Thank you so much. So that's the principle that I came up with. So the Loveshake now has a form, has three principles. They're basic, they're not complex. We're going to work with them now. But they're called stand apart, stand together, stand out. Raise your hand if you like it. Oh, thank you. Okay, awesome. Okay, what I want to do now is a kind of a mini workshop. Okay, I'm not going to show this because we have a technical problem. But what I want to do is a small mini workshop. I have the most advanced AI tool with me that I would like to use. It's not a sandwich. It's Postnotes, which I love. So I want to give you this, and this part of the room, I want you to come up with ideas, what it means to you to stand apart. There's no right and wrong, and just write what it means to you, right, to stand apart. So it might be a word, it might be a sentence, just be brief. And I'll show you how we can integrate that. So can you... And this part of the room, I want you to expand on the idea, stand together. What does it mean to you? And not necessarily romantic relationships, okay? So anything related to love and value or spiritual value. Okay, and here's the trick. I want you to move a little bit. So when you write these ideas, so this part, I want you to stick them here, okay? Be brief, there's no right and wrong, just write whatever comes to your mind. So stand apart, stand together, here. If you want, you can come down, you don't have to stay there. Move, it's still morning. By the way, just a tip. Maybe you have a line in your mind that stands for stand apart or stand together. Maybe it's a dialogue. So whatever that is, just write it down. Maybe it's a picture. Maybe you can scribble or what have you. Yeah. Okay, whatever you write, just put it here, please. And this is a fast exercise, so the whole point of it is not to overthink, if I can use that term. Yeah. Scandal drama. I like. You know, I'm born and you are born. And we can trust each other. I am mine, you are yours. I love that. It's an act of self-love. By the way, there's a gift for the winners, so I really encourage you. You act. There's a secret gift. Come on, just stick it, whatever you have in mind. Here. Okay. Okay, 2 more minutes. You're definitely the winners. No man is an island. That's beautiful. Thank you. Anyone wants papers? Oh, okay.
Stand apart.
Huh?
Stand apart.
Stand apart over there. All right. Okay. I mean, this is an exercise we can keep on doing today. I'll be glad to expand on it. Thank you so much. To respect, to notice. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how I expanded on these principles. Okay, and this is an exercise you can do for yourself because there are a lot of insights that I haven't thought of. Okay, I'll explore now. Okay, so stand apart. The first principle that came to my mind is individuality, right? And when you're doing this exercise, think visual. Think mind mapping, because that's how you can connect the dots backward. Again, Professor Hicks yesterday, he used the chart. That's visual, you can see it. Like you can write a whole volume, but no, you see it in a visual. So the way I was thinking about it, and there's no right and wrong here, we're exploring it, is, you know what, stand apart is a respect for my individuality. Because I have a uniqueness, you have a uniqueness, and so we don't want to, I put a glue stick, I don't want to be sticky, right? And now suddenly I have so many questions in my mind. How many times you see lovers who are sticky? They're always together, right? Like, give me a break. One of my favorite philosopher, poet, even though I kind of disagree with some of his ideas, he's a countryman, he's called Khalil Gibran. Look at this beautiful lines. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone. And stand together, yet not too near together. For the pillar of the temple stand apart. I rest my case. I can't add anything to this. But that is, in my view, a crucial output on how to treat our relationship, whether friendship or romantic relationship. The second principle is conflict. I'm looking forward for today's debate. Right? Are you? Yeah? I love conflict. Because conflict is how we grow. We need conflict. How many times you heard people around you, I'm definitely one of them, and I shared my story last year, where we're like, oh, he's not an objectivist, or he's an atheist, or a religionist. I'm not going to talk to him. Or a communist. I love to talk to communists, because I learn from them how they think. And I was sharing, where's Anis? I was sharing the story with Anis yesterday, how I actually discovered that they don't know much about their own philosophy. Right? But I'm impressed about how, if I can use the word, creative they are. How they brand themselves. Really. So conflict is very important, and the higher the conflict, the higher the reward. So embrace that, even in relationships. Again, a visual tool to think about. Like, I put a dragon here. That's how I think. And I think this is a great way to try it out. Why? Because the first thing that comes to my mind is, slay the dragon. An obstacle, slay the dragon. But what if we can befriend the dragon? There's a philosopher and poet as well, Rainer Maria Rilke. I don't know if you know him. Yeah, he says something beautiful. He said that sometimes the dragons are princesses in disguise. And all they want is to see us just brave enough to act with courage and brevity. And, they're like princesses in disguise. And I love that, right? So embrace the conflict. One of the ideas, I love that. Be able to love from distance. So now I have a new integration here for Stand Apart. I didn't think about this. How to deal with long distance relationship, right? How can we deal with it if we don't work out a certain system, a certain ideas? Many times what I see in my surroundings, that people when they are in long relationship, long distance, they never talked about it. They never explored it, right? So that's how you explore it. Stand together. Well, the first principle, I think, is communication. The core principle is really connecting on deep values. But communication, so the whole idea of introspection is to look inward, to have a conversation with yourself. When was the last time you had a conversation with yourself? A heated one. Right? Interesting. And then with other people. Again, a principle that I learned from Ayn Rand, it's very simple, it's small here. It's called name it. That's how I retain it in my mind. She explains that in Atlas Shrugged. Name your emotion. Name your wants. Name your needs. Name the problem. When you name it, you make it visible. And you discover sometimes that your needs are not your needs, they're wants or their desires. Or someone else might give it to you or not. Right? So name it. The second principle is connection. I saw so many people writing on empathy. Right? So we need to be empathetic. And again, I see that a lot in the freedom movement. We're not always too empathetic. We have our content and we're so careful to give our content to other people. But empathy is all about listening and understanding and putting yourself in other people's shoes. Right? It's about loving to learn from other people, even if they're wrong. Another principle, and again, you see how you mind map it, so don't think about, what's right or what's wrong at this stage. All you have to do is to just mind map it. This is something I learned from design thinking, which is a tool used by most innovators in Silicon Valley. So become a fly on the wall. Most designers use that term. You know what it means? Fly on the wall? So it's literally become a fly on the wall and observe. Don't intervene. The first thing you do is you observe. You observe people, how they act. You observe people, how they move, how they talk, how they smile, the smallest gesture and the widest goals. You don't ask, you don't intervene, you just observe. When you collect your observation, then you go and you ask. Now, do you see that principle, how it applies to friendship, to business, loving your work, loving your friends, loving your opponent? Make sense? Raise your hand if it makes sense. Okay. Now the last one is stand out, which is probably my favorite. And I want to encourage you after the session to use all the ideas you used here and try to connect them so that you can come up with your own understanding of standing out. But I'm going to share it with you just for the benefit of time. I don't think there is love without creativity. In fact, those who know me know, I don't think there's philosophy without creativity. Else it's going to be boring. So one of the definitions I love about creativity is that it's the creation of something new and of value. So if love is about value, then creativity is about the creation of more values. You see that? So one of the principles to nurture your love is to become creative. But we don't learn that. We don't have in our school system, I'm assuming here today, but at least from where I come from, we don't learn the tools to be creative. But that is the tool, because what you fall in love with, that formation of character, that you want to see how they face existence, as Rand said. How do you do it? How do you create values in the world? Right? So stand out. I also put a beautiful concept here, which is positioning. What do you stand for? What do you stand for? Again, Angel talked about integrity, right? But what is it exactly? What do you stand for in your life? How do you integrate your skills? I'm an economist, let's say, but I love music. Have you ever thought about integrating those? Right? So think about learn from the business world and integrate that with your relationship. I know I had that exercise with my wife. She's a film producer, and we did a workshop at home, just trying to help her position herself differently. And that was one of the most nurturing time we ever had, just because she was growing herself. You see that? Okay, the second part is about productivity. Again, it's linked to creativity. In order for us to nurture our love, we need to be productive. We need to work, we need to put our effort in this world, and that is linked to, again, what Angel was talking about. I love that all the ideas are integrated. It's linked to self-esteem. That's how you see, oh, you know what? I can do it. I'm able to achieve in this life. Do you see it? So again, keep on putting, that's the emblem, for example, of the self-made man. Again, think visually, like how can I keep on crafting myself? Why? So that I earn my eye. How do you earn your eye if you don't work on yourself? And I want to stress something here. Also, we had a couple of discussions with other people. Don't be afraid of being wrong, especially when you're studying philosophy. It's fine. It's fine to make mistakes. It's fine to go into an argument and, I might be wrong, but that's how I'm understanding the concept. It's okay, right? Or we'll become parrots, just saying whatever other thinkers are, writing. So it's fine to commit mistakes. So these are the three principles, and I put them together, and I now have a system called the Loveshake, which is still messy. But guess what? There's a message inside this mess. Do you see it? So again, don't be afraid of making a messy system. You're just brainstorming, because out of it, you're going to come up with so many ideas. And I found myself circling back to what Trent taught me, which is really what you love is what you stand for and how you face existence. It's what you stand for in your life in terms of virtues and values, and how do you apply them when you're facing existence. Make sense? Yeah? Cool. I have a small gift for you. It's nothing serious, but it is serious, but nothing much. I tried to turn all of that into like a workbook. So I want you, if you're interested, to scan the code and go download this workbook. It's just an exploration of how you can introspect and put that self-reflection into action. Okay? And what I want to say is, whatever you work on, if you want to share it with me, I'm happy to go on a call and help you as much as I can. Okay, I'm going to jump to Q&A now, and then I'll have a final word to say. Thank you so much. Okay, questions?
Can we go back to the next slide? to the previous question?
This?
Yeah, thank you.
You want to ask a question?
No, I wanted to scan the QR code.
Sorry. I do that to scan the code.
Leopold, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I have a question for you. I'm wondering if people who have a sense of life that is perhaps a very the corner view of the world is malevolent and they don't feel competent and they're afraid. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, how can they find love? What is it that their partner loves in them when they have a sense of like? Because when you have a sense of life, it seems to me that you admire this person for all these little mannerisms that they have. But what is it that you like? What is it? I guess the real question is: do you think someone who doesn't feel competent, doesn't feel like they are, I guess, the main character in their own story, can they find love?
Can you repeat the last line? Do you think?
Do you think they can find true love?
If they are what?
If they don't feel like they're, I guess, have the ability to live life to the fullest, if they don't feel like they're the main character in their own story.
Okay, so the first thing I just want to make a note on, the sense of life is not something positive all the time. So you might have a sense of life that life is miserable, right, and it's not worth living. So the way I think about it is like, it's like the collection of all these dots that become, and I think Rand used this term, it becomes recorded in your system, right? And what I love about the way she explains it is that there's a way for you to go down deep, to travel inward and try to fix your sense of life as much as possible. So there's so many factors, I think. I'm not an expert in that, but that's my understanding. Now, do you think you can find love if you're not competent in life? Yeah, it depends. What do you mean by love, right? So I don't make the judgment that you should be like successful and competent and have a high self-esteem in order to find love. I don't think so. From my understanding, I'm speaking my voice. I don't think so. I think you can learn it, right? Like I think one of the reasons why we come together in a relationship is because we want to grow together. Love is growth, right? Want to grow. I'm not an ideal person, but I want to learn how to become better. And love and having a partner or a friend is very important in that journey. So yeah, I wouldn't condemn that someone who doesn't have. Yeah, go on.
Could I just clarify? I mean, so I'm not talking about a process of growth, but I'm talking about, you think while someone holds that sense of life, at that point they could be loved.
Well, yeah, I got your point. So, have you read Atlas Shrugged? Okay, so for example, if you remember, there's a scene, again, I'm trying not to spoil it, but how can I put it without spoiling it? Okay, so Rand said something interesting. Tell me the person you find sexually attractive, and I tell you your whole philosophy of life. Tell me who the person you sleep with, and I tell you, you know. So I think that's so informative because, you know, like it depends on your whole philosophy. You're gonna find someone who connects with that. But I don't think that's a whole principle. Sometimes you have people who, you know, who find something different in the other person and help them grow. So I don't think you can generalize here from my own understanding. I hope that answers the question. Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for the lecture. It was just amazing. So actually, I have two questions. First one, since we are talking about love, do you think that so-called soulmates exist? And the second one, what do you think would happen if love didn't exist?
Ooh. Do I think soulmates exist? Not in the platonic sense, not in the idea that, you know, they were two and they were cut off. I don't think so, no, of course. But I do think that the way you shape, and I'm going to tell you a story after the Q&A, the way you shape your character and your ideas and your values, it's like a whole journey of finding someone who's equal to you emotionally and intellectually and who can grow you. So in that sense, I believe, at least from an emotional point, I believe in the idea of a soulmate, right? But not in the mystical term. But yeah, I think that's the second part. Which, by the way, I just want to, it begs the question here, like, if you lose your soulmate, would you ever find another love? I think, yes, it's possible. But again, we're individuals. We're so unique, right? So you can't find the same thing. So yeah, in that sense, yes, soulmate is possible emotionally. The second question is, what would life be without love? Wow, I love that. Okay, let me ask you a question. What is the opposite of love? Gore. What is the opposite of love? Ignorance. Hate. Empathy. Apathy. Okay. So I read somewhere once, and it's funny because it was a conference in advertising, but someone used a quote from a novelist, I forgot her name. She said the opposite,
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. We have somebody who wants to explain what he's saying.
Okay. So, I'll repeat. Someone just taught me something, that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. I love that. You know why? Because love is about value, and value is about life, right? So the opposite of love is not hate, because when you hate someone, and again, I shared a story last year if you were here, but if you hate someone, it's like you still feel something for them, but you disguise them or whatever, like there is something. But indifference is complete, negation. Like you don't want any value, you don't want anything. It's like disinterested. And if you're disinterested, you cannot live. So yeah, absolutely, you can't live without love. I don't think anything is meaningful without love.
And one more. So what's the opposite of hate then?
I think it's indifference. I think so. Again, I didn't think that's true but it's like something that got stuck in my mind, and it makes perfect sense. Because in love and hate, there's some kind of emotion involved and an evaluation. Indifference is like... if you read The Fountainhead... What's your name? Excuse me. What's your name? Have you read The Fountainhead? Okay, I'll tell you something after we finish, because I don't want to spoil it. One line from The Fountainhead.
Thank you for the very interesting presentation. So I was wondering, what do you advise in one's social relationships? How can someone communicate the need for individuality and personal space without actually hurting the feelings of the other person?
Wow, this is a very interesting question. So how do you communicate without hurting the other person if you're in a relationship?
The need for personal space,
Yeah.
break, and individuality.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk from my personal experience. I'm not an expert in that. But what I learned is, if you agree in the beginning on the principle of naming your emotion, I think you already crossed 50% of the obstacles. So for example, what I do with my wife is, I tell her, and we agreed on that principle, that whatever we're feeling, you tell it to me, like you don't have to hurt me in the core, but just tell it to me so that I fix it. And same here. Whether it's creating more space or what have you. Like I shared the story last year. I'm not going to retell it, but I noticed there's something within me when I started learning philosophy. I became too arrogant. I was like going out there, and I'm like, I know this is the truth, and I'm like fighting. And then she looked at me and she said, you're becoming too arrogant. And then she told me something that some of you remember it. Walls. I love that. So love don't get goosebumps. Walls don't get goosebumps. So the idea is like when you're talking to someone, you need to be careful about their emotions and their ideas. So when you name it, that principle worked with me. When you name it, you crossed 50% of the obstacles. That's what I can say here. Okay, any other question?
Yes, one question. So, you know how when we go back, our mind tweaks our memories?
Yeah.
So, and how do we know that what we actually believe right now was true back then, and it wasn't part of our illusion? And the second question is, when we go back, we try to remorse, we feel self-loathing, we feel all the negative kind of emotions, and we see what we have done wrong. How we can be the spectator of our own past? If you have any tips and tricks on that.
I do, because that's a process I do with my client when I'm teaching them on public speaking. So I'm not a therapist, but there's some links. So it's true, sometimes your mind tricks you, and you don't know whether it's true or not. But if you have someone with you guiding you on your journey and telling you, okay, what did that feel? Who was there? What was the conflict? What made it worse? Whatever are the questions. I don't think it's about going back to that moment and see the full truth. I think it's about understanding where were you and now where you are and how you're evaluating it, right? So it's not a journey of psychologizing yourself, right, and judging yourself. It's a journey of trying to understand, why did I feel what I feel? Like, for example, in the example of the find your treasure in the trivial. Like, my father never said that, right? But I notice when I'm looking inward that actually he pays so much attention to the trivial things in life, right? And even the trivial things meant so many things. So you can infer ideas. You can infer tools and methods, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I hope that's helpful. Cool. We still have time for one question or two. Yes, please.
Thank you for interesting presentation once again. I'd like to ask you about the beta culture in your relationship.
Data?
The beta culture in the relationship. So, how can we receive the feedback without somehow not to break our hearts? For example, I'll give you a simple example. For example, if you're making your partner during the month a tea and she only drinks and tells you thank you, but in one day he tells you that he hates tea. So this is a very healthy feedback, but I feel like kind of cheated for this 1 month because he was receiving my tea and saying thank you. And how can we balance to get it healthier way and not to feel like bad way to get feedback?
Okay, that's interesting. I have a book recommendation for you. You just reminded me. Anyone read before Nonviolent Communication? You read it, Marshall? Okay, check it out. Nonviolent Communication. It's a brilliant book because it deals a lot with these circumstances, where sometimes you have to differentiate between the wants and the needs and how you articulate them and how you don't have to hurt the other person. But I think the principle of communication, at least that I subscribe to, is that you need to be honest, right? That doesn't mean that you have to hurt someone. Like, again, in my practice, so many times I deal with people who are different than from my philosophy. Actually, the majority are. Right? Like, imagine this, I'm coaching someone on leadership and he tells me, it's all about servitude, leadership is about servitude, and it's about, dropping your ego. How do you deal with that? Like, I could tell him, well, you're wrong, absolutely not. But I could drag him in my questions so that he sees it for himself. Right? So I think that process can work in communication as well. You listen, you try to empathize, and you say, you know what, I don't like tea, whatever the case is, So, make sense?
Yes, but for this 1 month that you receiving the tea and giving you the thank you kind of feel bad because maybe there's uncovered topics that he maybe didn't like it.
Absolutely.
And sometimes people are not willing to share everything, and it faces and it pops up during the relationship, and it's very hard to pay it back.
Yeah.
So how to start talking about it and how to give them the healthy feedback without not hurting feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's the whole idea, is that you have to listen to them, you have to try to understand why they weren't sharing, and to uncover all these different dots that are guiding their action. I can't think of anything else. Now, it depends on the case. If it's betrayal, for example, that's a whole different... but it depends on the case, right? Okay. All right. Any more question before I close? No? Okay. I want to share with you just one last thought, and I have a challenge for you. So just before I arrived here, I went on dinner with my wife, and we met a new couple, they're complete strangers, and they asked us this most cliche question, which is, how did you two meet? Right? I'm like, okay, that's nice. So we told them our story. And simply put, I was 16 years old when I met my wife at school. And she hated me. She was intelligent and beautiful, and I was I cared more about muscles than my mind. And she found me not attractive, and she's like... So I left to university and then traveled abroad, and for 13 years, I didn't hear from her, I didn't talk to her, zero connection. 13 years. And then one day at the airport, I was walking down, I looked her in the eyes, I saw her, and it was love at first sight. So the couple were like, What? How is that possible? Like 13 years you're not talking to each other. How did you like him? You said he's not attractive. Like, why did you fall in love with him? And she said something that I really liked. She's like, oh, the person I saw in the airport was a completely different person. Right? And you are a completely different person from last year. So am I. Right? So it's all about, love is about growth. It's all about becoming that we wish to find. So I want you to take that message home, and I want to challenge you to, again, last year I said the number one obstacle you will face is forgetting. You come to these conferences, they're nice speakers, good content, and then you don't do anything about it. You forget to take action. So I want to challenge you to use that workbook or to use any of the ideas from the speakers and spend at least 1 month working on them. Trust me, it's going to make a difference. Whether you're interested in philosophy or writing or self-esteem or the Loveshake, just spend some time working on it. And I promise you, it's magical. It's almost magical. And I know that because when I took that step of transformation, what did I find? My father's hands, right? And which I miss a lot, but I know that I'll never be able to touch again. But I want to thank you, because through you and the Loveshake, I feel that my father is here today. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you so much.